It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call shots. This week on the Clone Wars, Seth makes possibly the nerdiest observation possible.
Yeah, it's true, and it fucking disgusted me.
I don't know that I have ever... That was pretty next level. We'll get to that, though. I'll reveal what that... We'll leave that as a tantalizing carrot on a stick there for the audience. How nerdy did I get while we were watching this arc? This arc doesn't really have a satisfying name, so I just refer to it as the Ahsoka arc. You can't really call it like, the Bad Batch or the Siege of Mandalore. This doesn't really have a satisfying sort of name that you can draw. It's just very Ahsoka-centric.
The Martez arc. No, I'm just fine.
Nah, I don't know about all that.
I know, I'm talking shit.
Now, this is, for those that don't know, Shots. It's our film and TV review podcast. And we're doing the Clone Wars. If you did not tune in last time, we covered the Bad Batch arc of Season 7, Episodes 1 through 4. And we have returned to cover the second arc, Episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8. So, just real quick, before we get into it, before we kind of talk about it in detail, we just got done watching it. We consumed it all in one sitting, just like we did the Bad Batch arc. So, which I do think that is the way you should consume these. Just watch it all. Just binge it.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about this one?
So I think we're on the same page with how we kind of feel about it for the most part. I like it, but I do see why some people had issue.
Yeah.
But overall, it was good. I enjoyed it for what it was.
It's funny. I had a good time with it. It does feel like there's sort of like all of the actual story that matters is just kind of stuffed into the end there.
Yeah.
Like it's very, very like filler.
Well, yeah, it's trying to build up the next arc, which is like the one that everybody's like, but,
yeah. And I do sort of see what people are talking about when they said they were disappointed, because you got to think this is the final season of the Clone Wars. You want it to be like all killer, no filler, Well,
the one episode of this arc was just dead ass. Like,
it was a straight. There was, I think it was episode 3 maybe.
Episode 3, I think. Yeah.
So, or the third episode of the arc rather. So the first episode, Gone with a Trace, Deal or No Deal, Dangerous Debt, and then Together Again.
So yeah, it was Dangerous Debt, where it was just dead ass. Like you even said, it was like, oh well, this was just a full circle.
It literally didn't matter. You end the episode exactly in the same place you start the episode.
It was like,
I was like, oh, that's kind of bad writing. And how do you feel? So let's just not getting into spoilers quite yet. I'll give a full spoiler warning when we get there. But how did you feel about, the big kind of new characters in this arc are the Martez Sisters. How did you like them?
I mean, they're all right. I didn't actively hate them or anything.
The fan community pretty actively hates them. They're kind of they're sort of generic.
That's kind of, I think, their deal, man. Like
you've seen it a million times. Right? I mean, it's just the sort of, we're sisters, and a tragedy happened with our family early on, and we're all we have,
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen it a million times, but I don't know. I didn't mind them. I don't have strong feelings on them.
That's kind of where I'm
way.
at. I'm like, it's whatever.
Yeah, they pretty much they're just there. I don't mind them. I don't hate them. Is what it is. So going through, let's get into it. Let's dig deep. Let's kind of go through I like to go through the plot of the arc here. So full spoilers if you have not seen this arc yet, do not listen. Go watch the arc and then come back and hang out with us as we kind of dissect the finer details here, because there is some stuff to talk about, especially towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
There's some cool stuff as we lead into this final arc of the season. I'm really excited to dig into that. But as for this one, so we start off, this picks up, pretty much right after we leave Ahsoka, when before the Clone Wars got canceled, and she leaves the Jedi Order.
Yep.
And that was pretty much the last we saw of her until she popped up in Rebels. Spoilers.
What? No.
Yeah. So, and we've had her appear in like comics, and she had like a book and stuff like that. But this little gap of time has never been explored with Ahsoka until now. So it is kind of nice to see her kind of journey pick up. We kind of saw her adulthood. It's funny. I was talking to Dan about this, a mutual friend of ours. It's going to be interesting because, with all the stuff, all the rumors of Rosario Dawson playing her in The Mandalorian and stuff like that, we literally are going to see Ahsoka from when she was like a child potentially through the rest of her life. You know what I mean? I don't know that there's been many other, maybe no other Star Wars characters that I can point to that we know this intimately well.
Yeah.
As Ahsoka, where we've seen this much of their life, So I find that interesting. I think that's why a lot of people connect to the characters, because they've just been there with her for basically her whole life, So, and this one thing that I really like, I'll get to it when we get to it, but this arc, the reason I call it the Ahsoka arc in my head is because there are little things that tie into her just journey as a character,
Yeah.
For all of the generic filler that this arc has, it does have some really clever bits that just make you take in the scope of her journey. So, anyway, and again, Todd, as always, stop me if you feel like I'm forgetting something or if I'm going too fast.
Of course.
Just based purely on my memory and the scarce notes that I take as we watch. So we start off, Ahsoka is on a speeder bike.
This is already just a really cool sequence, honestly.
I love this sequence going into the lower levels of Coruscant. Does she even say why she's going to the lower levels specifically, or is it just simply to get away?
Probably just to like stay, do the whole like low profile thing, just kind of
low profile. She doesn't necessarily have access to a ship to get like off planet, so
yeah, she's
just kind of keeping a low profile. She's going to the lower levels. She winds up on 1313,
which was I like when they mentioned that, I'm like, ooh, the knife in the wound.
Yeah, pour one out. For those that don't know, there's a canceled single player Star Wars game from years ago that was supposed to take place on 1313. By the way, I don't know if you heard about this. I think it was maybe like 6 months to a year ago, they revealed that was going to be that was going to be a Boba Fett game.
Oh, really?
Like, there was some unreleased screenshots where, like, straight up you're playing as Boba Fett in 1313. Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Wow.
So
that
was going to be a thing. It makes me feel like shit, Todd. It makes me feel like shit. It makes me want to kill myself.
For those that don't know, Seth's a big Boba Fett guy.
Makes me want to kill myself. So that was a thing. George Lucas had his hands in that too. Who knows how good it would have been? But whatever. It got canceled. We just gotta pour one out for the homie when they reveal that she's on 1313. She meets a character by the name of Trace as she sort of crash lands her speeder bike. Does this really cool parkour shit, by the way.
Yeah, really cool. Like running on the wall while still like holding onto the speeder and shit.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was a cool scene. So anyway, she crash lands. She meets this character Trace, who is sort of like, I don't know, a junker, like a sort of mechanic. I guess
that's basically how you describe her. Yeah.
It's said like a little later on that they know their way around droids and stuff, and she's built her own ship and stuff like that.
Stupidest name, but yes.
Oh, Trace?
No. The ship.
Oh, the ship. Yeah, it does have a stupid name. The Silver Angel. Pretty dumb name. So it's kind of right away. What I liked about this, though, is as Trace starts to get to know Ahsoka and stuff like that, Ahsoka, of course, trying to lay low, she is very purposefully not trying to reveal that she is a Jedi or an ex-Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
But her decision to do that is strengthened by the fact that, Trace kind of goes into talking about, these lower levels are, forgotten by the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, the Jedi don't give a fuck about us here.
Yeah, I mean, it gets even more like, she gets even more of a reason to not, like, later on in, like, the later episodes, but we'll get to that. But
they reveal personal reasons to not trust the Jedi, but just, it's interesting because they have just this vibe in the lower levels of Coruscant, like, us down here, we're beyond the scope of the Jedi. They don't view the Jedi as good guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, shit, beyond the scope of the Jedi. Yeah, they're deep below.
Yeah, the Jedi don't give a shit about them down there, which is interesting. It's nice to see what I like that Star Wars fiction is doing a little bit more of gradually is it's starting to disenchant the idea of the Jedi. It's starting to...
Yeah, there's something I really enjoy about that.
Because the Jedi have never... They're not... they're supposed to represent this idea of altruism and sort of heroism and like just complete good, but they're not. And nobody knows that better than Ahsoka. And so it's nice that we're kind of we're seeing through the lens of Ahsoka the way the downtrodden in the galaxy feel about the Jedi.
Yeah.
So, interesting stuff. So we meet then her sister, Rafa.
Yes.
I think is the name.
Yes.
And we immediately get that sort of like, we're family kind of bullshit. She doesn't trust Ahsoka,
It's like the whole thing, like, we only have each other, blah, 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 blah. It's like, and then, like, even in the first scene, it's just like, who's this? Like, looking at Ahsoka, it's like, okay.
And they establish this sort of like, everybody's got an angle, everything has a price down here, and blah, blah, blah. It's not long until some, like, Twi'lek guy hires them, and this is sort of how we get a little bit of an action sequence in the first episode.
I kind of... Well, was it with the droid?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he hires them to fix these binary load lifters, put like restraining bolts on them and stuff.
Yeah. And that's Ahsoka recognized. It's like, ooh,
oh shit, that's what these are. They're actually like they're actually violent and shit.
Prone to violence and shit. And then one fucking doesn't have a bolt on it or falls off.
Yeah, the restraining bolt doesn't get properly attached. It gets loose. Runs kind of rampant throughout the streets. Yeah. So they're chasing it through the streets, and there's a moment, again, this is how you get a little bit of an action scene. Otherwise, it just would have been an episode of nothing but talking, and we can't have that, Todd.
No, can't have that. You gotta have a little bit of an action sequence.
Have to have some sort of driving force. So, yeah, that's the sort of the way of having some action in the episode. And there's a moment there where the thing kind of like falls with Trace hanging onto it, and it's about to fall with her on it, kind of into the depths, and Ahsoka uses the Force to like hold it essentially.
Yeah. That's a thing. Like there's this like little moments of like Ahsoka using the Force throughout this entire arc, just like really sparse, really just like only when she truly needs to do it.
She's trying to do it as secretively as possible, so that she does not reveal to them that she is a Jedi. Because again, they don't like the Jedi. They don't have some sort of like great idea of the Jedi, and she's trying to lay low anyway. So that happens. It's funny because I think that's essentially how the first episode ends. Is after she saves Trace there, and then basically in the next as we get into the next episode, she's talking to Trace, and their relationship is strengthened a little bit. She asks where Ahsoka came to learn all the things that she knows. Oh, I went to an academy. I went to Skywalker Academy.
Yeah, there's just like little nods, like the shit like that. It's like, oh, where did you learn how to fight? It's like my big brother and shit. Like, oh.
Right. Little things like that, sort of stretching the truth. Not quite getting into it. Rafa kind of appears. She says, hey, like I took up a job. I hired a pilot. He backed out. And now she's like, I need you, Trace, and your fucking ship to run this job for me. Right. I think that's basically the setup.
I I was making jokes about like Rafa. It's like I need money for some things, and I'm like, drugs.
You could already sort of tell where the shit was going.
Drugs, you say?
And I wasn't super trusting her to begin with. I mean,
she had that like sort of personality where like something's up a little bit, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, it turns out that her character isn't as interesting as that.
No, it's
her
not.
character really is just the sort of older sister who means well, but ends up doing some bad things to help the people she loves. Blah blah blah. Again, you've seen it a million times.
That's that whole fucking setup. It's whatever.
Yeah, just that classic chestnut there. So anyway, there's a job. Rafa kind of takes on Trace and Ahsoka to help her with this job. Gonna get some credits and get off this thing, basically. It's a classic bullshit setup. They leave and they try to get into a military transport lane, which is funny.
Yeah.
And they're hailed basically immediately. And fucking Tom Kane is over, I'll have your fucking license for this, basically.
Sure, yeah. I love this moment, though. It's a really good...
It's a really good moment because as they sort of dilute from that and get back into the regular lane, we kind of look from the perspective of this person over the intercom, and we see that Anakin's with him.
Yep.
And Anakin can actually sense that Ahsoka is on the ship. And this is one of my favorite moments in the whole arc because he knows Ahsoka's on there. He can feel her, and she can feel him in a way. Mm-hmm. And they're like, they ask Anakin, like, General, do you want us to stop that ship? And he's like, no, let her go.
He lets her go there.
So he actually lets her go. And again, this is what I love about this show is just the way that it peppers in these little moments that just give us that little extra context of like, if he really wanted to get Ahsoka back in that moment, he could have.
Mm-hmm.
He could have totally taken her back into custody, and he could have had Ahsoka back.
I will say this. I think I said this in the last episode of Shots. I'm like, I'm definitely gonna watch episode 3 after this.
Yeah,
it's just gonna hit differently again.
It'll just hit different. So, Rafa says that their job is to pick up medicine. And again, you're just drugs. So they arrive at. It's funny because
we find out it's Kessel. Yeah.
We find out it's Kessel, but at first I'm like, "What planet is this? This is really beautiful."
Like
idyllic. It's lush.
Yeah.
It's lush. Absolutely. There's greenery everywhere. The architecture is beautiful. It looks kind of feudal Japanese architecture, and
that's the nice part of it.
Yeah, they are basically attending this like banquet for the people that they're doing this job for. And they get it, they kind of sit down, they're eating, they're drinking, and the guy's like, the other Twilight guy is like, we have some unrefined spice.
And I'm just like,
The second you hear spice, you're like, ding, ding, ding.
Drugs.
And they sort of, he reveals, basically he says like, he's like, the Aruba family of Kessel. Right?
Yeah, and I'm like, wait, is this Kessel? Like,
that's where I was like, if this is Kessel, that's sad, because this planet is beautiful.
But guess what? It's not that sad.
It's still pretty sad. So, turns out it is actually Kessel, but this is like the nice part of Kessel. Because we kind of go a little bit of ways and we get to the actual spice mines of Kessel.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks like, what we're used to. It looks straight out of Solo, right? That's actually something that I was curious about. I don't know that Kessel has ever been visually realized until Solo.
I think you're right about. Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah.
So I'm sort of like, I'm wondering. I'm like, they must have had to take cues from Solo when they were doing the art for this. You know what I mean? Because it does. I mean, it looks exactly as it looks in Solo. Yep. You know, the difference, of course, being that there are like human slaves there working in the spice mines versus droids and Wookiees, like we saw in Solo. So anyway. They sort of pick up the spice. There's like 3 big crates of spice that they are to deliver to what is revealed to be the Pikes, the Pike Crime Syndicate, which we're very familiar with. They've come up several times in the Clone Wars series, and Ahsoka immediately the sensors go off. Right, she's like, hold up, the Pikes are gangsters. This is a crime deal. This is not medicine. This spice is not being used for medicine. Like, this is some bullshit, right? They get into a big argument, Ahsoka and Rafa. Ahsoka's like, hey, we can take this to a place. I know a place we can take this where it'll actually be used for medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And Rafa's like, fuck you, we need money.
Yeah, money's money, you know?
Exactly. So, and Ahsoka, this is where it sort of comes to a head, because Ahsoka's like, you don't understand. The Pikes are ruthless. They'll take you into slavery. They'll take your ship. And that's when Trace is like, She even starts to like kind of be in her own little world for a second. She's like, nobody's touching my ship.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's touching my ship. And eventually she goes ape shit, and she just releases the cargo and dumps all of the
cargo.
spice.
It's like, ooh.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think both of us were like, you stupid bitch.
You done fucked up. That was your first mistake. So she dumps the spice, and then it's like, well, fuck, what are we going to do now? You know? And Ahsoka comes up with a plan.
Got a few tricks.
We got a few, shall we say...
Jedi mind tricks.
So they arrive on what... I think the Pikes... It's like Obadiah.
Yeah, Obadiah, I think was the name.
Yeah, they arrive on Obadiah, which is the Pikes' like home planet or whatever, and they meet the leader. I don't remember the leader's name.
It's called Dickhead.
Yeah, just Dickhead. They all look like penises. And basically, they're kind of trying to bamboozle him with a Jedi mind trick. They're like, hey, give us the payment first, and then we'll give you the spice, and then we'll just leave. But of course, the crates are empty.
No, I'm gonna be honest. His right hand man, that man should be the one running that shit.
Some real shit, because he didn't get fooled.
He's like, whoa, this is some bullshit.
He's like, sir, this is highly irregular. I'm going to inspect these crates before they leave. So, try as they might, they are not able to escape properly. So they get caught in like a tractor beam that they set up. And Ahsoka, Trace, and Rafa are taken prisoners on Obadiah.
I think it ends. This episode ends with them in jail, right? Or they end up when they get captured like that.
I think that's right. I think literally the last shot is them in the cell.
If not in the cell, it's like just them with the tractor beam on the ship.
Yeah. Okay. So then the episode begins with them being put into the cell, and it's funny. I noticed this. This is really funny to me. This is a really, as nerdy as the thing that I said earlier, that I said later on as we were watching this. This little Easter egg that I caught might be even nerdier than that, and I don't even know if you realized when I caught it.
I feel like I know the moment.
There's a moment they're taking another thing prisoner, and it's a blue snaggletooth.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the deal with blue snaggletooth. So, blue snaggletooth is one of the most rare Kenner vintage Star Wars figures, and they, for some reason, I don't know why, it's the blue snaggletooth is extremely rare, and so now they have a blue snaggletooth, a snaggletooth wearing like blue clothes, getting arrested, kind of like almost halfway making him an actual character, you know?
Mm-hmm.
He's never been a character, he's never like had a name, but yet here he is in this episode being taken prisoner by the Pikes. So I almost wonder if like they're going to make him an actual character at some point. That'd be pretty funny. But anyway, that's a super deep cut. Super, like, only fucking a dork like me would catch that. Anyway, so they're taken prisoner while they're in the cell. And again, stop me if I'm skipping anything. But Rafa reveals sort of that they're, she goes over talking about why they don't like the Jedi specifically, like on a personal level. Yeah. And what's really cool, and this is another moment that I really loved, she's describing these events from their childhood, and what she's describing is the events from the Clone Wars movie, where Ahsoka was introduced. She's describing that whole sequence of events and what was going on with Zero the Hutt and stuff like that. And Ahsoka is obviously remembering all of this because this is when she was inducted in. This is when she was found, And that was a really cool moment of just really tying in like the beginning of her sort of journey into where she is now. I loved that. Anyway, they revealed that like their home was destroyed in that whole thing. Their parents were killed during the events of that. And I don't know which Jedi she was referring to specifically.
I feel like I know who they're talking about. I just don't remember the name.
my first thought, are they talking about fucking Ayla Secura? I don't know though, because I think they said that she was green. The character.
I know who they're talking about. I just need to remember.
I'm not sure, but either way, they might have been. There's a few people. They might have been talking about Luminara. I don't know. There's a few people that they might have been talking about, but I think she said she was green skinned. Anyway, she said there was a Jedi that
I think it is Luminara.
Okay, yeah. So she basically said that a Jedi found them and said like the Force will be with you always, blah blah blah. And she's like, "That's
like a choice must be made. A choice had to be made, or whatever." Blood, some bullshit there.
Right. So that basically she's like, and that's all the Jedi had for us. It was just some bullshit. Basically, they didn't actually help. So anyway, that's why they don't like the Jedi. Blah blah blah. So Rafa is then taken and tortured by the robot torture guy that you don't like.
Oh yeah, that fucking thing. I hate it.
Like he looked like he was out of like one of those weird like fucking creepy concept like H.R. Geiger.
Well, dude, they fucking designed the damn thing to be hunchbacked.
Yeah, he was hunchbacked and he had this weird elongated emotionless face.
Dude, it bothered the shit out of me. I do love that you can tell that like when Rafa does wake back up, she didn't give anything.
Right, because she wakes back up and she's like, I don't know where the spice is, blah blah blah. So as this happens, so they take her back. They then take Trace to interrogate her. And as this happens, Trace gets a hold of one of the Pike's guns and escapes.
Mm-hmm.
And while this is all happening concurrently, Rafa's kind of passed out in the cell. Yep. Ahsoka uses the Force to unlock their gate.
Set tells Rafa some bullshit. Oh, it was a power outage.
Yeah, it was a power outage, totally. And Rafa totally buys it at that moment. She's like, "Oh, finally we catch a break." Blah blah blah. Anyway, they escape. As they're kind of going along, they get out to kind of the streets, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And Ahsoka sort of tells Rafa, she's like, "Wait up," kind of confronts her, like, Trace isn't cut out for this criminal shit. She would never tell you no, basically, like, don't ask her to be a part of this life of crime type shit.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of has a heart-to-heart with her, and that's when Rafa's like, what do you want out of this? Rafa's like, what's your angle? And Ahsoka's like, I don't have a fucking angle. And that's one thing I like, too, is, like, Ahsoka actually is the idea of what the Jedi should be.
Well, that's even something that is told to her.
And that's something they literally
episode.
say.
Yeah, it's like... Yeah, it's like what I thought the Jedi would be is what you are. It's like,
I love that because we're seeing that on display. She doesn't want anything. She just wants to help. So they meet this homeless goat fucker. Little D. Bradley Biggs like, have some credits. Fucking drinking, just bold-faced drinking. They tell him to fuck off, basically, and he bumps into some Pikes later on that are looking for them, and he sells them out. So they're running. Goat fucker sells them out. They're running. And this is where it kind of starts to get a little interesting because we see that in the crowd is a hooded Mandalorian.
Yes.
And you can kind of see like the Death Watch symbols like emblazoned on. You know immediately that it's Bo-Katan, but the episode doesn't boldface tell you that yet.
But it's like we know.
Yeah, but you know. So anyway, Trace and Rafa kind of like get captured again. And yeah, and like as Ahsoka sort of doesn't get captured and is running along, the Mandalorians are sort of observing her. And they're like, "Oh shit, like we could use her help," kind of thing. Like, let's keep an eye on what's going on here. And then the episode ends with them all being captured, and it's like, okay, cool. Like
round 3.
Yeah, it's like this didn't end up mattering at all. All right, awesome. We ended, like I said, exactly where we began. Cool. Anyway, as we come into the next episode, Ahsoka has a plan. Essentially, they're all brought before the leader of the Pikes again. And she is essentially, Ahsoka's pretending that she's like going to betray them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ahsoka's like, hey, they're not my friends. Like they know where the spice is. Send them out on another run to get the spice. I want a cut of it. You know what I mean? And if they come back empty-handed, you can deal with them then. So that's all happening. The Pikes do sort of see through it. The Pikes do sort of know. Like, I think that right-hand man is like, he's sort of like, this is fucking bullshit.
This is another deception.
This is another deception. But the leader is like, I know, but we don't want to piss him off, basically.
And both of us are like,
you already know who him is, at that point. And, of course, they're referring to Maul. And anyway, Ahsoka, while this is going on, her sort of side mission here is she's going throughout and laying detonators everywhere. And at the same time, the sisters are going to, they're like, hey, why don't she put her neck on the line for us. Like, the only way we're going to get away with this is if we actually provide the spice in question. So let's get our hands on some spice. And they go down and they effectively go to try to steal some. And this is where the nerdy thing came in that I referenced at the beginning. Because I see that all these like workers that are handling like the spice manifests are these gross looking characters, this gross looking species that I immediately recognized because we've only seen it one time before. It's such an unmistakably nasty, weird design that I just immediately, I was like, is that fucking like one of those Ben Quadraneros motherfuckers?
And I'm like, I had to look him up. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
You're like, who the fuck is Ben Quadraneros?
And
why do you know his name?
I look him up and I'm like, you know this motherfucker's name.
For those that don't know, Ben Quadraneros is one of the racers from episode 1 and the pod race.
Mm-hmm.
And he just has such an unmistakably weird design that I don't think we've ever seen another member of his race until now.
I don't think so, yeah.
So now we're seeing there's got to be 8 to 10 of them here,
little weird motherfuckers too.
Little weird motherfuckers, and as they're getting into fights, like they're basically trying to bullshit them, right? Like Rafa's like, we're supposed to be picking this up. Go get your manager type shit.
Oh, the manager comes.
The manager comes. He's a fucking Trandoshan, and they get into him and Rafa get into a fight. This is, by the way, as you pointed out, this is one of the many ass whoopings Rafa receives throughout this episode.
Still not even my favorite ass beating. My favorite ass beating happened in the episode prior to this, was where like she just like goes to hit a motherfucker with a pipe, does absolutely nothing, gets pushed down and just kicked right to the face. It's like, oof.
It's like, all right, that didn't go the way you planned it.
Well, it's like a running bit. It's like this, like.
And it's funny. She's sitting there fighting this Trandoshan, and the little weird Ben Quadraneros.
Oh yes, kill her. I was like, shit.
Yes, kill her, hurt her, kill her. Well, God.
All of them really got into it. It's like, oh shit.
Meanwhile, so they managed to steal the spice, whatever. Meanwhile, Ahsoka is planting these detonators, and she eavesdrops on a conversation, like a hologram conversation that the Pikes are having with Maul. And Maul's sort of like, even though fucking you're a tiny little insignificant part of this, if you fuck up, like, it's gonna ruin everything, And Maul actually senses her.
Mm-hmm.
Like in that scenario. He doesn't actually physically see her, but he does sense her presence.
Yep.
Even though it's just over hologram. Which is interesting. And you're sort of starting to see the sort of movements of him with the Crimson Dawn and him sort of becoming a crime lord.
Yeah, straight name drops the Crimson Dawn. It's like, oof.
It's cool. It's really cool because, in a way, we're seeing a lot of stuff that we saw in Solo kind of coming. We're starting to see the
beginnings
first
of it. Yeah.
Exactly. I really like that a lot. I like that we're starting to see acknowledgement of Solo. I have hope. I really do think that we're going to see that story continued in some way.
I want to see that story continue. It's like, shit. I
really do think that. So anyway, they get captured yet again. And as Ahsoka's in handcuffs there, the Pikes are sort of like, we're going to execute you. The Pikes learn that she's a Jedi. effectively. What does Ahsoka do to sort of spill the beans on that? I don't remember.
I feel like she was just then, like, while she was fighting, I think she used the Force or some shit.
Use the Force in a combat scenario against the Pikes, maybe. And he's like, oh, cool. If we execute you, we'll gain some favor with Maul. Essentially,
it's a shame the Jedi Council sent you, and they fucking stun the shit.
Yeah, they stun her, and then they have her in handcuffs, and the sisters return with the spice and everything, and they're like, cool, we're just gonna kill you all. And as this is happening, Ahsoka's detonators go off. And they run away. They escape in the Silver Angel. Action sequence. And essentially, during this is when Ahsoka reveals, kind of, the sisters are like, "You should have told us."
It's like, how could I?
How could I have told you? Like, you just told me all this shit about how you hate the Jedi. I'm not a Jedi anymore. They're like, I didn't know you could leave.
So you could do that.
Yeah. So
it's
they
like,
have
why?
that.
It's like, why would you leave? Type shit.
Right. Right. And so anyway, they have that whole discourse. They escape in the Silver Angel, and the Mandalorians follow.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the sister. And this is kind of as the arc is wrapping up. The Mandalorians follow them back to 1313, back to where the sisters sort of live. And they have that moment that we talked about earlier where they're like, hey, like you're basically the idea of the Jedi. You're the way the Jedi should be.
Yep.
You are what we view as a true Jedi, essentially.
Yep. Which
was nice. It was like a nice validating moment. I liked that a lot. And anyway, they're having that whole thing, Rafa trusts her and all this shit now, blah, blah, blah. And that's when Bo-Katan steps in and reveals herself and is basically like, yo, we need you to help us defeat a common enemy. And
brings out the hologram of Maul. It's like...
Yeah, brings out that straight hologram of Maul, of course, leading directly into the next arc, the Siege of Mandalore. And Ahsoka's like, I don't want to get wrapped up in this. Like, I don't want to have to cross paths with the Jedi again. Blah blah blah.
You have to.
Yeah, because that's just the person she is. You have to help. So, and that's essentially how the arc ends. I don't think I missed anything major.
Nothing major. There's like little minor shit, but it's like nothing of importance.
So, I mean, overall, I liked it. I thought that, for all of the sort of running around in circles that this arc does.
Just good moment. There were still good moments in this arc.
Good moments, good little hyper nerdy Easter eggs for people like me to chew on, and little dumb shit like that, and tie-ins to Solo, as I said, and we I don't know, it was overall I liked it. I don't I can understand why people were disappointed, because I think a lot of people come into this and like, cool, season 7, this is going to be firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, this one didn't fire on all cylinders.
And this one, it wasn't until really that last episode that it really started to find its footing there. But I feel like this last arc, I'm really excited to watch the Siege of Mandalore, because I feel like this is going to be the real shit.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think.
Like, this is going to be this is where it's going to all come to a head.
Now this is pod racing.
And now this is pod racing. Todd, I don't think I could have ended this episode more eloquently than that. So, do you have any closing thoughts?
That's about it, man.
All right, folks. That has been the Ahsoka arc for Season 7 of the Clone Wars. One more arc to go. Very much looking forward to it. Can't wait. Of course, we're going to be a little bit, we're going to be waiting with everybody else right now, because that arc is currently ongoing. But hopefully it won't be long after that airs that we can actually sit down and just binge it and record an episode.
We kind of caught up. Oh my God.
We're halfway caught up. We're actually, as of right now, we're only 2 episodes behind. So, but I think at this point, we're just going to wait for it to end.
Yeah, just binge it.
And then just binge it and record an episode as soon as possible. So anyway, we will see everybody when we come back for the Siege of Mandalore and the end of the Clone Wars. So we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening. Bye.
See ya.